Very much, Mr. Chairman. We have so little time and so many questions. I'll try to be brief, and I urge you to do the same. Dr. Keller, first. In your testimony, you explained the multi-junction solar cells that are in the satellites, too expensive for terrestrial applications, but you're trying to bring them back to Earth. What are the material, structural properties of these cells that are so desirable? And briefly.
So, very briefly, it's almost like a sandwich. You're stacking all these different materials on top of each other. And the way we're doing this right now is very expensive to lay down all these materials, make the intermediates. So the idea really is, how do we bring the technology we have running around on Mars, how do we bring this back on Earth? And this is where we need new innovation to make this next step of the manufacturing. And that's, again, what I talked about.
So it's a manufacturing thing.
The process of the multi-junction cells will stay the same, but the way we make it, we have to make it in a much cheaper way to put this onto our drones and satellites.
That sounds promising. Could you describe the advancements in battery, again, Dr. Keller, battery sciences, and are there actually batteries now or in the near-term future that are capable of meeting utility-scale power demands?
So my personal opinion is that, again, what I tried to say earlier, that batteries are not batteries. So there's a difference on the architecture if you go into a battery into a car versus a battery for a grid. Because as you know, when you drive around, you're limited on space what you can put into a car. So you want to have very high energy density. You want to try to do it as light as possible. On the grid side, well, a lot of times room is not necessarily the limitation.
But I mean, even a battery the size of this room.
Yeah.
Utility scale?
So
really?
I think we can, and I think also would say the batteries will depend on what the application is. Will we have batteries for 2 weeks of storage, you know, at the grid level?
When you say 2 weeks of storage, megawatt hours, day in, day out for 2 weeks?
So I think we will, with certain technologies in batteries, we will go to a grid level storage possibility.
I'm intrigued. So I'm always, next, again, Dr. Keller, the potential for solar to X, solar to fuel. What fuels, and I will say I'm always puzzled that there's this dearth of reporting of research on hydrogen. It seems like such a simple ladder, you know, to electrolysis hydrogen. Am I missing some key?
No, look, you're absolutely correct. When you forecast where the electricity costs might come in the years, it might be that electricity is getting very plentiful. People might argue it might get so cheap that it's not worth to meter anymore. So the key is, what are we doing with electrons? So the idea is, can you take electrons to something else? So you can call this power 2x, for example.
Well, I mean, if you could make a lot of hydrogen, you can store that.
You could do this,
right? Or
you could go through hydrogen as a platform molecule to hydrocarbons. You can use hydrogen to go to ammonia.
Or you can just burn it.
So the idea is, can you diversify electrons? And we're doing more with electrons, just putting them into the grid. So, and this is, I think, where we need research and very fundamental research to go down this path. Yeah.
But it just looked like an obvious one to me. I'm going to turn to Mr. Stein, if I may. I want to focus now on the market forces that have decreased the cost of photovoltaic solar energy. Do you think that's basic science research that's had the major impact, or is that just innovative manufacturing, or perhaps it's government fiddling with tax credits?
Well, as far as the lowering the cost itself, there's no question that has happened, and that's certainly it's incentivized by the tax credits, but that probably would have happened independently of that. But the largest portion of it is almost certainly Chinese manufacturing innovation, because that's why the reason solar panels have become so much cheaper is really because they're being imported from China.
And they're probably subsidizing the manufacturers. That's your point?
Well, they probably are subsidizing at least a portion of the manufacturer, but it's also just they have cheaper labor, they have lower environmental standards, frankly, because some of the components that go into some of these solar panels.
I'm going to interrupt you. We're running out of time. If there were no tax benefits to solar, no investment credits, no mandatory buybacks, all this stuff, would solar be economically viable, and what do you imagine a megawatt hour would cost, if you can guess that?
I think it'd be economically viable in certain parts of the country. I think Southern California, solar makes a lot of sense. Massachusetts, it doesn't.
So within range. In the 30 seconds left of you, Mr. Simmons, you mentioned grid integration reliability issues, the duck curve. Could you describe EERE's focus on utility scale demand, and is the storage of energy part of that focus, and if so, how?
At EERE, we're focused not on the utility scale storage so much. That is really the Office of Electricity. at the Department of Energy. However, we work together with the Office of Electricity through the Grid Modernization Initiative to bring together both of our offices to be able to look at all types of storage, whether it is storage at home, storage on the grid.
The truth here is that I've exceeded my time, and as we all know, our chairman is very capable of telling time, and I won't push my my luck any further. Thank you very much for all of the panels, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Simmons, would you like to